The world is in shock. Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead and Britain is in mourning. The 36-year-old princess was killed in a high-speed car chase in Paris early Sunday morning Australian time.
We have reports from Paris that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident.
Recently, a forgotten locket was opened after 26 years. Inside, a single strand of Diana's hair. What the DNA revealed left investigators speechless. A secret daughter no one knew existed. Prince Harry's real father exposed. And Diana's own bloodline hiding a truth the royals never wanted found. The test results were so explosive, the palace went silent for weeks. William demanded answers. Harry requested his birth records. And the monarchy's carefully constructed image came crashing down. What Diana left in that locket wasn't just hair. It was evidence that would rewrite royal history forever. Diana, Princess of Wales, had been killed in a car accident in Paris,
where Diana had expressed worries about the relationship of Charles and Camilla.
She was just 36 years old. The Mercedes she was traveling in had crashed at high speed in the Pont tunnel, striking a concrete pillar with devastating force. 2 others died at the scene that night. Diana was rushed to hospital but succumbed to her injuries shortly after arrival. The shock was immediate and global. Millions mourned a woman who had redefined what it meant to be royal, someone who had connected with ordinary people in ways the monarchy had never managed before. The official narrative was straightforward enough. A tragic accident caused by excessive speed and the relentless pursuit of photographers. The driver had lost control. The car had been traveling too fast. It was a terrible combination of circumstances that led to an unthinkable loss. For years, that version of events stood largely unchallenged in the public consciousness, even as questions lingered in certain circles about the details of that night. But in early 2025, something unexpected happened. A piece of jewelry that had once belonged to Diana resurfaced at a private auction in Switzerland. It was not part of any official royal collection, nor had it been listed in any of the inventories compiled after her death. The item in question was a locket, described by those who knew Diana as a personal keepsake she carried on private trips. It was the kind of object that held sentimental value rather than monetary worth, the sort of thing that would mean nothing to anyone except its owner. The locket had been kept in controlled storage conditions for more than 2 decades. According to records from the preservation facility in Geneva, it had been received in 1999 under strict instructions that it should remain sealed. The staff responsible for its care confirmed that it had never been opened during that entire period. What made this particular item unusual was not just its provenance, but the fact that it was the only object in the private archive with a biometric security code attached to it. Someone, at some point, had deemed it important enough to protect in a way that went far beyond standard preservation protocols. When the locket was purchased by representatives of an independent biomedical research organization, their interest was in the potential historical value of any biological material it might contain. They were not expecting what they found. Inside the locket was a strand of hair, preserved in remarkably good condition. The sample was immediately subjected to DNA analysis using modern genetic sequencing technology. The laboratory conducting the work did not initially know whose hair they were testing. They were simply asked to extract and analyze whatever genetic material was present. The results came back with startling clarity. The DNA belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. When compared against archived genetic profiles that had been taken from Diana during her lifetime for medical purposes, the match was exact. There was no ambiguity, no margin for error. The hair in the locket was definitively hers. For the researchers, this was confirmation that they had genuine biological material from one of the most famous women in modern history. But the significance of what they had found went far beyond simple authentication. The real Genhan came when the genetic data was analyzed more thoroughly. DNA testing in the modern era can reveal far more than simple identity. It can trace family relationships, identify shared ancestry, and uncover connections that might otherwise remain hidden. As the research team worked through the genetic markers in Diana's sample, they began to notice patterns that didn't align with what they expected to find. Or rather, they found connections that no one had anticipated. The phrase used in the preliminary report was technical, but unmistakable in its implications: gene chain divergence with paternal anomaly. In simpler terms, the genetic structure showed variations that suggested complications in the accepted understanding of bloodlines and parentage. This was not a conclusion that could be dismissed as error or contamination. The sample had been sealed for decades. The testing had been carried out by independent facilities with no connection to the royal family or the British government. Multiple verification processes had been completed. The science was sound. What made this discovery particularly significant was timing. For more than 25 years, Diana's death had been the subject of intense scrutiny, conspiracy theories, and public fascination. Books had been written, documentaries produced, investigations conducted. But through all of that, certain aspects of her personal life had remained private, protected by the passage of time and the discretion of those who had been close to her. The locket, forgotten in a climate-controlled vault, had preserved not just a physical remnant of Diana herself, but evidence of truths that had never been publicly acknowledged. Those who had worked closely with Diana during her life later confirmed certain details that added context to the discovery. The locket was not a piece of formal royal jewelry. It had never appeared in any official photographs or at state occasions. Instead, it was something she wore during private moments, away from the constraints of palace life. One former member of her staff recalled in a 2003 interview that Diana always wore that particular locket when traveling alone, and that it was not part of the royal jewelry system. It was hers personally, and she kept it close for reasons that were never fully explained to those around her. There were other details that began to make more sense in light of the genetic findings. Diana had once made a remark during a private meeting in 1995 that was documented by someone in her inner circle. She had said there were things she never wrote down, but that she had left enough clues for people to face the truth eventually. At the time, those who heard her say it assumed she was referring to her troubled marriage or the difficulties she faced within the royal family. But the comment took on new meaning when considered alongside what the DNA analysis had revealed. The genetic data did not just confirm Diana's identity. It pointed to relationships and connections that had never been part of the official record. It suggested that there were aspects of her life, decisions she had made, circumstances she had navigated, that had been carefully kept from public view. And most significantly, it indicated that the bloodline that connected Diana to the next generation of royals was more complicated than anyone had been led to believe. For decades, the narrative had been clear and uncomplicated. Diana had married Charles. They had 2 sons, William and Harry. Those sons would carry forward the Windsor line, combining Diana's humanity and warmth with the ancient traditions of the British monarchy. It was a story that the public had embraced, one that gave hope for the future of an institution that had often seemed remote and disconnected. But the genetic evidence emerging from that forgotten locket suggested that the true story was something quite different, something that would challenge not just family relationships, but the very foundation of how royal succession was understood. The locket's reappearance in 2025 set in motion a chain of discoveries that would fundamentally alter the understanding of Diana's life and legacy. When the independent biomedical organization completed their initial analysis of the hair sample, they followed standard protocol by cross-referencing the genetic data against available databases. What they found went beyond simple identification. The DNA sequence revealed a direct biological connection between Diana and another individual currently living in the United Kingdom. This person was a woman born in 1987, and according to all available records, she had no known ties to any aristocratic family. The discovery was handled with extreme discretion initially. The woman, whose genetic profile matched Diana's at a rate of approximately 50%, was contacted privately and informed of the findings. Her first response was disbelief, followed by an immediate request for independent verification. She wanted the test conducted again at a different facility, using different samples. The organization agreed. a second laboratory, operating completely independently of the first, was provided with biological samples from both the woman and the archived material from Diana. The results came back identical. There was no scientific doubt about what the data showed. This woman shared half of her genetic code with Diana, Princess of Wales. In biological terms, there was only one explanation for such a genetic match. The relationship between them was that of mother and daughter. The woman was Diana's child, a daughter that no one outside a very small circle had known existed. The implications were staggering. Diana had not had 2 children, she had 3, and one of them had been living an entirely separate life, completely removed from the royal family, the media attention, and the public narrative that had defined the story of Diana's legacy for nearly 3 decades. The woman's identity was eventually revealed to be Sarah, though she has consistently refused to allow her full name or any photographs to be published. According to the biographical information that emerged during the verification process, Sarah was registered at birth at a private medical facility in London. The birth record was unusual in one critical respect. The section where the mother's name should have appeared was completely blank. Only a personal identification number had been entered. Within her first year of life, Sarah had been legally adopted. She grew up with no knowledge of her biological origins. Her adoptive family, by all accounts, provided her with a stable and loving upbringing. She went on to work in education and lived what those who know her describe as a quiet, purposeful life, far removed from any connection to royalty or public attention. The question that immediately arose was how such a thing could have happened. How could Diana have had a child that remained unknown for so long? Researchers began examining Diana's schedule for the year 1987, looking for any gaps or unexplained absences that might provide context. What they found was telling. There was a 3-week period that year during which Diana was completely absent from all public activities. No official statements were issued by the royal family to explain her whereabouts. No diary entries from that period have ever been made public. It was as if she had simply stepped out of public life for a brief window of time and then returned without explanation. During that same period, financial records showed a significant payment from Diana's private budget to a medical facility in London. This facility was not part of the standard royal medical network. It was a private clinic, the kind of place where discretion was guaranteed and records were kept strictly confidential. The clinic had a secure payment account that was linked to the Spencer family budget, which suggested that this was not a casual transaction, but rather something that had been carefully arranged through Diana's own family channels, rather than through official royal procedures. The existence of this payment, combined with the timing of Diana's absence from public life and Sarah's birth record, painted a picture that was difficult to interpret in any other way. Diana had given birth to a daughter in 1987, and the entire matter had been handled privately, outside the view of the palace, the press, and the public. The reasons for such secrecy could only be speculated upon, but the biological evidence left no room for doubt about the basic facts. Sarah herself has remained almost entirely out of public view since learning of her connection to Diana. She agreed to participate in one interview, conducted under conditions of anonymity, but has refused all subsequent requests for media appearances. According to those who have spoken with her, she is not interested in claiming any connection to the royal family or seeking recognition for her status as Diana's daughter. Her life is her own, and she appears determined to keep it that way. The only request she made following the confirmation of her biological origins was that all genetic data and documents relating to her ancestry be officially held in the Spencer family archive, Diana's family of origin, rather than in any royal collection. The royal family's response to the revelation of Sarah's existence was measured and careful. No public statements were issued, but an internal report was circulated among senior members of the family. The document acknowledged that the individual concerned has biological characteristics consistent with documents held before 1997. This was the first written confirmation from within the royal structure that someone other than William and Harry was directly related to Diana. It was a carefully worded acknowledgement that avoided any explicit admission, while also not denying the fundamental truth of what the genetic evidence had shown. But the discovery of Sarah was not the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning. As researchers continued to analyze the genetic data from the locket, they began comparing samples from different members of Diana's family. One comparison in particular yielded results that were completely unexpected. When Sarah's genetic profile was compared with that of Prince Harry, the analysis showed that they shared the same mother but not the same father. The data was unambiguous. On the maternal side, the genetic markers matched perfectly, confirming their relationship as half-siblings through Diana. But on the paternal side, there was no similarity whatsoever between the two DNA samples. This finding meant that Harry and Sarah had different biological fathers. For Sarah, whose paternity had never been part of any public record, this was simply additional information about her origins. But for Harry, the implications were far more significant. If he and Sarah did not share a father, and Sarah was definitively Diana's daughter, then questions about Harry's own paternity were suddenly opened in a way they had never been before. The genetic evidence was suggesting something that had long been the subject of rumor and speculation, but never confirmed, that Harry might not be the biological son of Prince Charles. The information about the genetic mismatch between Harry and Sarah on the paternal line was not widely released to the press, but many senior members of the royal family were informed through private communication channels. The data was presented in technical terms, but its meaning was clear enough to anyone who understood the basics of genetic inheritance. The line of succession, which had always been understood in terms of direct descent from the monarch through legitimate heirs, was suddenly called into question in a way that had no precedent in modern royal history. For those close to the situation, the discovery of Sarah represented not just a personal revelation about Diana's life, but evidence that there were significant events and decisions from nearly 40 years ago that had never been recorded in any official documentation. Diana had lived a portion of her life in a space that existed outside the formal structures and records of the royal family. She had made choices that were hers alone, and she had kept secrets that remained hidden until technology advanced enough to unlock the biological evidence she had left behind. The locket, sealed away for decades, had preserved the truth in a form that could not be denied or explained away. And that truth was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The genetic analysis that revealed Sarah's existence had opened one door. But the findings related to Prince Harry would prove even more disruptive to the established narrative of the royal family. When researchers compared Harry's DNA sample with archived genetic material from Prince Charles, they were expecting to find the standard markers that would confirm a father-son relationship. Instead, what they discovered was an absence of connection. The Y chromosome, which is passed directly from father to son in an unbroken line, showed no match between Harry and Charles. This was not a partial match or an ambiguous result. It was a clear negative finding. Genetically speaking, Charles was not Harry's biological father. The question of Harry's paternity had circulated in tabloid rumors and private conversations for years, but there had never been any concrete evidence to support the speculation. Now, for the first time, there was scientific proof. The DNA analysis was not conducted by a single laboratory or through a single methodology. Multiple samples were used, extracted from different sources, and analyzed by independent facilities that had no connection to the media or the British government. The results were consistent across all tests. Harry's genetic profile did not align with Charles's in the ways that would be expected if they shared a direct biological relationship. The implications of this finding were enormous, not just for Harry personally, but for the entire structure of royal succession. Harry had been raised as a prince, second in line to the throne after his brother William for much of his early life. His identity had been built around his position within the Windsor family. The possibility that he was not actually a Windsor by blood challenged everything about how he had understood himself and his place in the world. But the genetic data went further than simply ruling out Charles as Harry's father. It also pointed to who the biological father actually was. When researchers analyzed the Y chromosome markers in Harry's DNA, they found a near-perfect match with another individual whose genetic profile was available for comparison. That individual was James Hewitt, a former British Army officer who had been involved in a well-documented relationship with Diana during the 1980s and early 1990s. Hewitt had served as a cavalry officer and had given Diana riding lessons, which was how they first met. Their affair had become public knowledge years after Diana's death, and Hewitt himself had spoken about the relationship in interviews and in a book he co-authored. But he had always maintained that his relationship with Diana began after Harry was born, making it impossible for him to be Harry's father. The genetic evidence told a different story. The match between Harry's Y chromosome and Hewitt's was not just similar, but showed the kind of consistency that exceeds the threshold required for legal paternity determination. Additional biological markers, including elements related to the immune system and blood type, also showed strong correlations between the two men. The testing was thorough and included samples provided by a third party to ensure there was no possibility of contamination or manipulation of results. When a second independent analysis was conducted using different samples, the findings were the same. By every scientific measure available, James Hewitt was Harry's biological father. According to sources close to the testing process, Hewitt agreed to provide a DNA sample when requested, but only on the condition that his identity would not be disclosed in any public version of the final report. He cooperated with the analysis, but made it clear that he did not want to be drawn into public discussion about the results. For him, the matter was intensely private, regardless of what the science showed. The testing organization honored that request in their official documentation, though the information eventually made its way to those who needed to know within the royal family structure. The timeline of Diana's relationship with Hewitt had always been somewhat unclear. Public accounts placed the beginning of their affair in 1986, which would have been after Harry's birth in September 1984. But the genetic evidence suggested that the relationship may have begun earlier than either Diana or Hewitt had publicly acknowledged, or that the nature of their contact before the affair became serious was different from what had been reported. The DNA results could not be reconciled with the official timeline unless that timeline was inaccurate. The way the information was shared within the royal family was carefully controlled. According to inside sources, Prince William was the first to see the complete results of the genetic analysis. He was given access to all the data, including the technical reports and the comparison studies that had been conducted. Charles was informed shortly after, followed by Harry himself. The entire process of disclosure took place over a period of less than 48 hours. Once all three men had been briefed on the findings, a private meeting was arranged at a secure location outside London, away from any possibility of press attention or public observation. The content of that meeting has never been disclosed, and none of the participants have spoken publicly about what was discussed. But the aftermath was telling. The Royal Press Office suspended all external communications for more than a week following the meeting. No public appearances were scheduled, no statements were issued. The family essentially went silent while they processed the implications of what had been confirmed. For an institution that operates on carefully managed public relations and maintains a constant presence in the media, this withdrawal was highly unusual and suggested the depth of the internal crisis the revelation had created. Harry's response to learning the truth about his paternity was private, but those close to him noted a significant shift in his behavior and priorities. He requested immediate and complete access to his birth records, including the original birth certificate and all documents related to St. Mary's Hospital in London, where he was born. The request was granted without delay, and the records were provided to him in full. He reviewed everything, including medical notes, registration documents, and administrative records from the time of his birth. No changes were made to any of the official documents, but Harry had copies of everything sent to his legal team in California, where he and his wife Meghan had been living since stepping back from royal duties. The revelation about Harry's paternity also cast new light on his decision to distance himself from the royal family in recent years. His departure from official royal life, his move to the United States, his willingness to speak publicly about the difficulties he experienced within the institution, all of these actions took on additional meaning when considered alongside the question of his biological origins. Whether Harry had known or suspected the truth before the DNA evidence was confirmed remains unclear, but the genetic findings certainly provided context for his complicated relationship with the family he had been raised to believe was his by blood. For William, the situation was perhaps even more complex. As the heir to the throne, his position was legally secure regardless of Harry's paternity. But the confirmation that his brother was not his full brother, that they did not share a father, fundamentally altered the nature of their relationship. They had grown up together, navigated the loss of their mother together, and presented a united front in public for decades. The genetic evidence did not erase that shared history, but it did change the biological foundation on which their brotherhood had been understood. Charles, for his part, had to confront the reality that the son he had raised and publicly acknowledged as his own was not biologically related to him. Whatever private doubts or suspicions may have existed over the years, the DNA evidence removed all ambiguity. The question of how much Charles had known, or when he had known it, remained unanswered. But the confirmation of Harry's true paternity represented a personal and institutional challenge, unlike anything the modern monarchy had faced. The genetic findings related to Harry did not just affect the individuals directly involved. They raised fundamental questions about the nature of royal succession, the importance of bloodline in determining legitimacy, and the degree to which the public narrative about the royal family reflected actual biological reality. For an institution that had built its authority in part on the concept of hereditary right and unbroken lineage, the revelation that one of Diana's sons was not descended from the ruling dynasty created a crisis of identity that went far beyond any single person or relationship. The revelations about Sarah and Harry's paternity had already shaken the foundations of how the royal family understood itself, but the genetic analysis was not yet complete. As researchers continued to examine the DNA data extracted from Diana's locket, they turned their attention to her own genetic profile, looking for markers that would provide a complete picture of her biological heritage. What they discovered would challenge long-held assumptions about the Spencer bloodline itself and add another layer of complexity to an already extraordinary situation. Diana's complete genetic profile had been compiled from multiple sources. The primary sample came from the hair preserved in the locket, but researchers also had access to archived biological material that had been taken from Diana during routine medical procedures in the 1990s. When these samples were compared, they matched perfectly, confirming once again that the locket material was authentic. But when the genetic markers were analyzed in detail, looking at ancestry and heritage rather than just identity, something unexpected emerged. Diana's maternal genes did not originate from any traditional European aristocratic lineage. The finding was presented in a highly technical report that was distributed to only 3 recipients. One copy went to William's personal office, another was sent to the Spencer Family Archive. The third went to an international genetic research facility in France that specializes in historical population genetics. The report described Diana's genetic background as originating from a branch of the population that had historically lived in South Asia. The markers were distinctive and relatively rare in European populations, particularly among the aristocratic families that had intermarried for generations within a relatively closed social circle. This did not mean that Diana was primarily of South Asian descent. The genetic contribution was part of her heritage, not the whole of it. But the data clearly showed that Diana's maternal lineage included at least 4 ancestors who were not of British origin. For a family like the Spencers, who had traced their aristocratic pedigree back centuries and took considerable pride in their noble heritage, this was information that complicated the official family narrative. The discovery also meant that Diana had carried genetic material that was essentially invisible in terms of physical appearance, but undeniably present in her DNA. The research pointed to a specific individual as the source of this genetic heritage. Her name was Eliza Kuwark, and she had lived in the 18th century. Historical records identified her as a woman from Gujarat, a region in western India. In the limited documentation that existed about her life, she was described as a maid who had worked in the household of an English merchant family. The official record suggested she had no children with that family, and her role was presented as purely domestic and servile. But the genetic evidence told a different story entirely. Eliza had descendants, and Diana was one of them, separated by multiple generations, but connected through an unbroken maternal line. The implications of this discovery were significant on several levels. First, it meant that Diana herself had ancestry that was far more diverse than anyone, including possibly Diana herself, had fully understood. Second, it meant that her children, William, Harry, and Sarah, all carried this genetic heritage as well. They were not purely of European descent, as the traditional narrative of royal bloodlines would suggest. They had ancestors from South Asia, a fact that was now documented in scientific records, even if it had never been part of the family's official history. There is some evidence that Diana may have intuited something about her origins, even without access to genetic testing. In several letters she wrote to her mother during the early 1990s, she expressed feelings of not quite fitting into the royal system. In one letter, she wrote about feeling out of place and mentioned a desire to understand more about her true origins. Another letter from the same period contained a line that seems particularly resonant in light of the genetic findings. She wrote that she was not like them, meaning the royal family, and that everything in her blood told her she came from somewhere else. At the time, these comments might have been interpreted as emotional responses to the difficulties of her marriage and her struggles with royal life. But viewed through the lens of her actual genetic heritage, they take on a different quality, as if Diana sensed something about herself that she could not quite articulate. Diana made a trip to India in 1992 as part of her official duties, participating in a series of humanitarian activities. But according to those who traveled with her, she spent considerable time in the country beyond what the official schedule required. She visited areas that were not on the formal itinerary and seemed deeply engaged with the culture and the people in ways that went beyond the usual protocols of a royal visit. One member of her staff later commented that Diana seemed more at ease in India than she had been in months, as if she had found something there that resonated with her on a personal level. Whether this was connected to some unconscious awareness of her ancestry is impossible to say, but the observation is worth noting. The Spencer family did not issue any public response to the genetic findings about Diana's heritage. However, a cousin of Diana's confirmed that the family had maintained some private records related to Eliza Kuwark. These included a copy of a birth certificate for a child who was listed with an English father, providing documentary evidence of the connection between Eliza's descendants and the Spencer line. This was the link between what the report described as Oriental blood and the British aristocracy. The fact that this information had never been formally recorded in the family's official genealogy suggests that it was either unknown for much of the family's history or was known but deliberately omitted from public records. Some medical professionals who reviewed Diana's health records in light of the genetic information noted characteristics that made more sense with this context. Diana had shown an unusual ability to adapt to tropical environments during her travels, rarely suffering from the kinds of illnesses that often affected other members of the royal family when they visited hot climates. She also demonstrated resistance to certain diseases that were common in Europe, which had been noted in her medical files as unexplained variations. These were not dramatic differences, but they were statistically notable, and the genetic data provided a potential explanation for these traits. The existence of South Asian ancestry in Diana's genetic makeup also meant that this heritage had been passed to the next generation. William, Harry, and Sarah all carried genes inherited from their mother that traced back to Eliza Kuwark and the population she represented. This did not affect their legal status within the royal system. British succession law is based on legitimacy and lineage, as defined by marriage and recognition, not on genetic purity. But it did challenge the long-standing assumption that the royal family represented an unbroken line of European descent. Diana had been the first person in the modern royal family structure to bring this genetic heritage into the Windsor line, even if no one had known it at the time. The internal report that documented these findings included excerpts from Diana's private diaries. One passage, marked in red to indicate its significance, was written after her trip to India. It read simply that the truth does not need to belong to anyone so long as it is not buried. The line suggested that Diana understood the importance of truth being preserved and eventually revealed, even if she could not have anticipated the specific form that revelation would take. The fact that she kept the locket, that she ensured it would be preserved under secure conditions, and that it contained biological material that would eventually unlock these secrets, all point to someone who understood that the full story of her life and heritage might only become clear long after she was gone. For William and Kate, who had been briefed on all of the genetic findings, the information about Diana's ancestry added yet another dimension to an already complicated situation. Kate attended meetings where the implications were discussed, and according to internal memos, she expressed particular concern about how this information might be perceived publicly if it became widely known. She requested a thorough review of how the family's image might be affected and how best to prepare for potential public reaction. The legal representatives confirmed that the genetic findings did not change anyone's position in the line of succession, but they acknowledged that completely denying or ignoring the documented evidence was no longer a viable strategy. Sarah, when she was informed about the full scope of the genetic findings, including the South Asian ancestry she shared with her half-brothers through Diana, responded with what sources described as quiet acceptance. She had already had her entire understanding of her identity upended by learning she was Diana's daughter. The additional information about more distant ancestry was significant, but in the context of everything else she had learned, it was simply one more piece of a puzzle that was far more complex than she had ever imagined. Her request remained the same, that all documentation related to her genetic heritage be properly archived within the Spencer family records, where it would be preserved as part of Diana's true legacy. The genetic evidence that emerged from the forgotten locket had revealed truths that spanned generations and crossed continents. It showed that Diana had lived a life more complicated than public records suggested, that the royal bloodline was not what it appeared to be, and that heritage and identity were far more nuanced than the simple narratives that had been constructed around one of the most famous women in modern history. The truth, as Diana herself had written, had found its way out of the darkness, carried forward by the very genetic code she had left behind.